The laughter around me was muffled, distant, as I stared out at the city. Neon lights flickered in the reflection of the window, casting fleeting patterns against the darkened glass. I sipped my drink, trying to focus on the skyline, on the faint hum of the streets far below. But I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting. "Come here." His voice sliced through the noise, soft but firm. My breath caught, and I turned, my hazel eyes meeting his dark, unyielding gaze. Ethan. He was sitting casually on the couch, his arm draped over the backrest, exuding that effortless confidence that made him impossible to resist. I obeyed without hesitation, weaving through the room to reach him. My heels clicked against the polished floor, the sound strangely loud in my ears. When I reached him, he reached out, his fingers brushing against my arm. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down my spine. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice low, almost teasing. "You," I admitted, my cheeks flushing. He smirked, a knowing glint in his eyes. "Good girl." Those words sent a ripple of warmth through me. I lived for his approval, for the way he made me feel like I was his entire world, his possession. I felt his power everywhere. Later, when the guests were gone and the apartment was quiet, I stood in the bedroom, slipping out of my dress. The silk slid down my body and pooled at my feet, leaving me in nothing but my heels and the necklace Ethan had bought me. I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror and paused. My long, dark hair framed my face, and my hazel eyes looked different, vulnerable. I didn't have long to dwell on the thought. Ethan appeared behind me, his dark eyes locking onto mine in the mirror. His hands rested on my bare shoulders, heavy and possessive. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice a whisper against my ear. "Always," I replied. "Good." His hands slid down my arms, then my waist, tracing every curve. I leaned back against him, my body pliant, my mind clouded with anticipation. He was everything, my center, my gravity. When he touched me, I didn't just feel wanted, I felt owned, and I loved it. The pleasure he commanded. When he laid me down on the bed, I didn't think, didn't question. His hands and lips demanded my attention, and I gave it willingly. He worshipped my body with a hunger that left me breathless, his dark brown eyes devouring every inch of me. "Tell me what you want," he growled, his voice rough and commanding. "You," I gasped, my nails digging into his shoulders. His smirk deepened, and he took me apart piece by piece, pushing me to the edge over and over again, until I was nothing but a trembling mess beneath him. Every thrust, every whispered word sent waves of pleasure crashing through me. "You're mine," he said, his voice low and firm. "Don't ever forget that." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My body was too overwhelmed, my mind too lost in him. But I didn't need to say it. He already knew. The thoughts I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking more and more about the things I'd never said out loud. It wasn't that I wasn't satisfied. I was. Ethan was incredible in bed, his confidence and skill leaving no room for complaints. But something had shifted in me. I kept hearing the words my friend had said at lunch. Good sex equals orgasm. If you're not finishing, is it even worth it? It wasn't about finishing. I always did with Ethan. But her words stirred something in me. When had I ever told him what I liked, what I wanted? I hadn't. Somewhere along the way, I decided it wasn't my place. That realization lingered, gnawing at me. When I finally spoke up. One evening, I found myself pacing the apartment, nervously twisting the hem of my shirt. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he heard my footsteps, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. "What's on your mind?" he asked. I hesitated, then took a deep breath. Do you think size matters? His eyebrows rose, and a slow, amused smile spread across his face. Are you fishing for compliments, Sophia? No, I said quickly, shaking my head. I've been thinking about preferences and good sex. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. What about it? I swallowed hard, my cheeks burning. I want to talk about mine, what I like, what I want. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His gaze was steady, almost too intense, and I fought the urge to look away. Finally, he stood and crossed the room to me. You've never said no to me, he said, his voice low. Are you saying you've been holding back? No, I said quickly. I've never told you what I need, and I think I should. His lips quirked into a smirk, but his eyes softened. Okay, he said. Show me. How he let me lead. That night, everything changed. Ethan let me take the lead, something I'd never done before. My hand shook as I guided his, my voice trembling as I told him where to touch, how to move. At first, I was terrified that I'd do it wrong, that he'd lose interest, that I'd ruin the moment. But Ethan's confidence never wavered. He followed my lead, his dark eyes watching me intently, his every touch deliberate and measured. Keep going, he murmured, his voice rough. Show me everything. And I did. By the time we were done, my body was trembling and my heart felt full. I collapsed against him, my head resting on his chest, my breaths coming in shallow gasps. You're full of surprises, he said, his fingers brushing through my hair. I smiled, my hazel eyes meeting his. I just want to make you happy. You do, he murmured, pulling me closer. And I'll make sure you never forget it. Where I belonged. As I lay there in his arms, I realized something. I'd spent so much time trying to please him, trying to fit into the mold of what I thought he wanted. But tonight, for the first time, I'd let myself take up space. I'd let myself be seen, be heard. And Ethan hadn't just accepted it, he'd embraced it. I smiled to myself, my body still humming from his touch. I didn't know what the future held for us, but for the first time, I felt like we were on equal footing, or at least as equal as we could be. Because no matter how much I opened up to him, no matter how much I shared, one thing would always remain true. I was his, and I wouldn't have it any other way. If this intense, provocative story left you breathless, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and let your thoughts pour out in the comments. Craving more seductive, electrifying tales? Subscribe now to stay wrapped up in every thrilling chapter and exclusive content. Your desire fuels these stories, so hit that follow button and turn on notifications. There's so much more heat to explore. Dive into the next enticing adventure and let your passions take the lead. Stay tuned, and thank you for surrendering to the story.